This one from Brian Phillips on Twitter. What if the Flyers organization actually isn't the storied/great franchise or location for players that they think it is?
I like this question.
I like it because this is something I've believed for a while. Who are these awesome free agents that the Flyers have signed over? They've made some good trades, absolutely. Danny Briere was a hell of a free agent pickup. Outside of him, who are these guys?
We have discussed this before many times over the years. They haven't really been trying to sign free agents for quite a long time.
For this period, but even going back to the Bobby Clark era.
But who are the ones that were like, nah, I don't want to play for the Flyers? That doesn't exist either. These guys go where the money is. We got a bunch of guys before because we could write giant checks for anybody that we wanted. It hasn't been that easy now. I do kind of think it's interesting because I do wonder, I think that players would want to come here not because they think it's like some great storied historical franchise, but it's a big market with a lot of fans that's probably fun to play in if you're a hockey player. And it's, not as crazy as Toronto, but you're still going to be a guy where people know who you are.
Yeah.
I would imagine that a lot of players could have walked around in Arizona and nobody knew who they were. If you want to be a famous athlete, Philly's a good place to play. Mitchkov seems to understand. If you come here and you're good, people are going to worship you. I think that that's probably a draw for a free agent.
It does appear now with this current generation of players that lifestyle trumps everything.
Yes.
And
I'd agree with
the
that.
Florida teams, Nashville, Southern California, these are places people want to play. Now, yeah, you get the guys who are like Artemi Panarin and Adam Fox who are like, yeah, I'm going to be living my lifestyle rich as hell in Manhattan.
Well, yeah, people like that
great.
lifestyle too.
And
yeah.
I do think that Philadelphia offers some of that for players who kind of want that bigger spotlight. But like you said, it's not Montreal, it's not Toronto.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's as important to guys as much as, yeah, man, I live on the beach.
It's probably not if you're a beach guy. And it's also probably not as important as money. If you are a free agent,
Taxes.
and the taxes.
Oh, God.
If one team can offer you $9 million a season and the Flyers can only offer you $8 million because of whatever cap situation that they're in, you're probably going to go to the $9 million team. You only have so many years in your life to make this money. So yeah. But also the idea that players have not wanted to come here, I think is one that there's no evidence for. Which is, I think, where this question stems from. The idea that we're not getting free agents because they don't want to play here, I think is not a real thing.
I think that's where he's going with it based on other conversations I've had recently with him on Twitter.
Well,
not a bad
that's
guy,
not real.
but
You made that
somewhat argumentative and pessimistic.
Okay.
I love having you as a listener, but I think that's where he's going with it. I do think there is something to it's not as attractive as it's the Flyers, man. But I do think you can say that about a lot of big markets. How many times have we said that Lake Tahoe game is hockey players' dream?
Yeah, of course. Right.
No fans, nice scenery, media not allowed in the locker room. That's so much of their dream.
See, I disagree with that. I do agree that probably the lack of the media is something they want, but I think most players like to play in front of fans.
I think
they like the energy of the crowd. It's much more fun for them to play in a packed arena where they can feed off the energy as opposed to a round robin game in the World Juniors where the place is 10% full.
I will say, Gary Bettman, for all his faults, his expansion of hockey, in these secondary markets where you don't think that exists, if the team's good, it does. And as we've seen, even in these major markets like Philadelphia, if the team stinks, it doesn't exist. And so it's all about okay, I want that, but I can get that with the Florida Panthers, which was a joke a couple of years ago. I can get that with Tampa Bay, which was a joke when they came into the league.
I do think, though, that the whole storied franchise thing that definitely exists within Flyers fandom, I highly doubt that is a thing that exists with especially this generation of hockey players, because we're talking about a thing that happened in the 70s.
No, the Blackhawks are a storied franchise now. That's what these kids grew up watching.
Yeah. There's also the element, too, where the idea of it being this storied franchise, great franchise, everything like that, the reason why we hear about that so much. And this is a feature, not a bug. This is what they want.
Yeah.
It's because the entire organization is filled with guys who played for the team.
Right.
So they have all this pride in the Flyers, and they think that everyone else should feel as passionately about Flyerdom as they do.
Mm-hmm.
And while I don't think that it's non-existent, it's certainly not as prevalent as they wish it was.
Yes.
Because they love it. They
Yeah.
bleed orange. It's their whole friggin' life is the Flyers. Like, and I'm not, that isn't me shitting on them.
No,
like,
no.
like Bob Clark is a Flyer. Like his entire identity is tied up in the fact that he is the Flyer. Like Bernie Perrant goes to games. Keith Jones, like, basically said, this is the only job I would have taken that wasn't in broadcasting, was helping to reestablish the Flyers and bringing them back to prominence. Like, these guys eat this shit up.
Yeah.
This is their life. I don't think that is the general view of the hockey world.
No.
The hockey world does not view the Flyers as highly as the Flyers view themselves.
You have to keep
Which
winning
makes
to
sense.
maintain that.
Right,
And like,
that's the
yeah,
thing.
man, 70s, absolutely. 80s, did they win? No, but they were there the whole time.
All the time.
And
90s,
even
they had
into
Lindros.
90s, they had the down period, but then Lindros comes, they go to a final, and then through there, they're constantly relevant. But since the lockout, that hasn't been the case. They've been
Yeah.
to 2 conference finals.
And the thing is that you can get it back. Like,
You can get it
like,
back, absolutely.
I remember, and this maybe isn't the best comparison, but I do think it's an interesting comparison. When I was a kid, I was really into college football, and I would follow all the teams, whatever. And I would always find it very weird. So this would have been like the 90s into the early part of the 2000s. I always found it very weird when you would, like, that Alabama was always like firing their coaches and being like, this is unacceptable, we're Alabama. And I remember telling my dad, like they've never been good. Like why do they have this inflated sense of ego? And my dad's like, well, you got to understand that, like, way before you were born, they were the shit. Like,
Yeah.
they ran college football. They are this storied program that,
Joe Namath,
like,
baby.
like from the time that you started following college football through, like, before they got Saban, they were nothing. They were a mediocre SEC team. So I, for my entire formative years, had the feeling that, like, Alabama was like, whatever. They're like one step above Northwestern. Like, no big deal. Whereas now they're back to being Alabama. Like, now they are the blue chip, the big program in college football. So you can get it back. But there's an entire generation that does not think of the Flyers as anything special, because for the last 15 years, they really haven't been.
We all silly like the mayor.